What neuroplasticity is how do we bring energy to the cells? When you get up and exercise, movement creates that brain-derived neurotropic factors, BD and F. So there's three things you need to think about with neuroplasticity being one of them. One is neurogenesis and neuropruning. If we can just teach people to pause, break, and breathe, their life would change tremendously. It's the reactionary mind that's causing all the problems. You can't be depressed and breathe. You can't be angry and breathe. You can't be distressed and breathe. When you start breathing, you start thinking about solutions. This is brain fitness, because your brain's not just up here, remember, it's everywhere.
Dr. Patrick Porter is an award-winning author, educator, researcher, and speaker. He's the inventor of BrainTap, which is designed to activate the brain's neuroplasticity to achieve brain fitness and other lifestyle improvements. BrainTap is being utilized by some of the highest performing companies in the world like Google, superstar athletes like Tom Brady, and everyday folks who are wanting to improve their overall health and well-being. Let's start off by talking about our three interconnected brains.
Yeah, a lot of people think our brain is just this 3 to 5 pounds of gelatinous material between our ears. That's really, I call that the Google tablet. You know, when you have a Google tablet, you have to connect to the Wi-Fi to do anything. And that Wi-Fi is actually starting from your heart. So you have a heart brain that has 40,000 neutrino cells. These act just like a brain. That's why when they did a heart transplant on a person that had, the guy was a health nut because he was trying to keep his heart, but then he got a transplant and he started craving Kentucky Fried Chicken. And they found out the guy they got the heart from loved Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know, I don't know if that's the best heart to get, but he got it. But this is going over and over again because that is a brain that you have. That brain actually sends twice as much information to the body as the body does to the heart. So think of it as the orchestra leader. But then the third brain, or what a lot of people call the second brain, is the gut. There's more neuron connections in the gut. And when you think about mental health and people wondering, I don't think we have a mental health crisis. I think we have a physiological crisis. People are sitting too much. They're not moving. They're not breathing. They're not eating right. You know, it's a lifestyle problem. It's not all in their head because our brains are not designed for this day and age. You know, so when you think about our gut, if your gut brain isn't right, then you have what's called leaky gut. A lot of people talk about that. But I can guarantee you, if a leaky gut, you have a leaky brain. That means also you have a leaky heart because these are all connected. And so you're not getting the right information. So it's all about information for the body. And so these three, if they coordinate and work together, you've got a powerful force for good. Now the heart projects a frequency, a magnetic frequency that can be measured up to 18 feet away from the body. So we can measure heart rate variability. We don't have to be on the body to do that. Now with EEG, the brain, we have to measure it with probes and, you know, EEG technology. They've never figured out how to really measure the gut brain, but we know it's there because it makes 95% of all the neurotransmitters. You know, so the brain, of course, instructs it, hey, I need these neurotransmitters, let's do it. And we're supposed to get those during sleep, but 2/3 of the world not sleeping, which you're an expert at, you know, they're basically not building up their neurotransmitter bank account. So they get up in the morning, they're fine. By 2 o'clock, when your temperature drops 2 degrees, I know you had Michael Bruce on the call. He's one of our doctors too. When that temperature drop happens, the biological system goes into chaos and they're chasing sympathetic drive the rest of the day. And now they don't have any energy. By the end of the day, they're crashing on the couch, eating potato chips and drinking a Coke or something, you know, because they're low frequency. I always tell people frequency is what you frequently see. So if you don't have high frequency people look for high frequency foods, high frequency activities, high frequency books, high frequency people. You know, we need to get their frequency up. And that starts with number one with the diet, and of course, and these brains, when we're not eating for our brain, right? I still remember in the 70s when I got a track scholarship, so I had to train in the summer, and I was visiting my grandparents, and I put on my shoes and everything. I'm going out running, and my uncle said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going for a run." What the? You know, he's like, "What are you doing that for?" He goes, "You want to get in shape? Let's go out on the farm." You know, obviously, yeah, you could. These guys were strong. My relatives were 90, 100 years old, playing cards, counting cards, really smart. There's no such thing as dementia Alzheimer's. That was like every once in a while, there'd be an outlier that had it. Now, 30-year-olds are getting it because of our diet. We're not feeding our brain, we're feeding our body, and the body doesn't need as much as we think it does.
Yeah. Oh, wow. This has already blown my mind. Just the sentiment, it's not all in our head. Right. And so often, obviously, you know, kind of our command center for many of us, we just are existing from the neck up.
Yes.
And to understand that so let me clarify this. Our heart and our gut has essentially brain-like tissue. It has neurons that are associated. Well, used to just associate it with the brain exists in our heart and in our gut.
Yes, there's more in the gut than anywhere else. So when you think about it, and when you think about what the standard pro quo is, I'm going to give you an SSRI. Well, they've only been approved for 14 days of use. They've never been tested beyond 14 days, but the doctor will tell you they won't even work for 28 days. So is it the placebo, or are they getting the body dependent on it? Because the brain is an energy hog. If it can offload its work, it's going to do it. And we can talk a little bit about it. What happens is you pay Peter today, but Paul's going to ask for his money later. Sooner or later you're going to pay the piper. The body keeps score. And so when we think about the brain and body and what's going on, a lot of people are looking for the pill without the skill. You've got to have the skill. Just one example I'll give the listeners. We did a study down in Brazil with because our device was actually designed, when we talk about brain fitness back in the 80s, we designed it for pain clinics because there was no opioids. And they were looking for solutions. So we were doing biofeedback. We were looking at skin temperature, respiration, heart rate, and all those things. That's what got us into like heart math and places like that. And so what we noticed was when we got people to calm down and get into what's called the alpha brainwave state, pain went away. If we could get them to theta, they had no pain. And myself, I had painless surgery on my shoulder without any anesthetic. My dad hypnotized me. The doctor cut up my shoulder, took a piece of bone from here, put it here, screwed it on. I didn't have any because I have adverse effects to the drugs, that they would give you to put you to sleep. So, but I did it no pain, and I healed faster. And so the thing is that the body knows what to do, but we're interfering with it with all the things. Our lifestyle really is interfering with our brain function. So we have to change our lifestyle to match today's conditions. Yeah.
And in today's conditions, this is why we have emerging fields of like neurocardiology, neurogastroenterology. This is well established at this point, but the expertise is so far beyond where you're at. And this is why I'm so grateful to have you here. One of the things that I've talked about over the years, especially recently, is the emerging field of psychoneuroimmunology, psychoneuroendocrinology, and how our thoughts deeply impact, for example, our immune system, or deeply impact what our hormones are doing. We have this very powerful, and I've said this before, the most powerful pharmacy in the world is the human brain.
Yes, 30,000 neurochemicals was just a thought.
And the reason why it is so powerful is because it's tailor-made for you.
Yes.
Right. So it's made for your receptor sites. We've got wonderful innovations where we have these outside hormones and different things that we can utilize, but it's made for you. And one of the most powerful things that we can do is understand how this stuff works.
Yeah. When we work with the body, we won't be feeling like it's working against the body. One example I'll give the listeners, a lot of people get up in the morning, they have a cup of coffee. First thing, worst thing you can do for your brain, because your brain is already creating norepinephrine, dopamine, and cortisol. But as soon as you drink that coffee, the brain goes, you know what? I don't need to do that anymore. They're doing it for me. So the cortisol trough, which is supposed to be high in the morning, it starts out a little bit lower. And pretty soon you got to have coffee to even boost your cortisol. But it's supposed to be naturally up high, and then by 2 o'clock it crashes, and then it resets. And then if you do another brain fitness exercise, whether it's breathing or doing a BrainTap session, whatever it is, you do some kind of physical workout, whatever, to get BDNF going. Now your brain's back up. The problem is they sit through that whole time and they're drinking coffee the whole time, and the brain never gets a chance to use its own internal pharmacy, like you said. We're not allergic to those things.
I want to ask you about this because one of my favorite, and I actually sent this to a friend of mine. I copied because I got an advanced copy of the book, which is wonderful, but I copied this section and texted to him because it was so relevant to something we've been talking about. And you made this really great analogy with neuroplasticity and a wheat field.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. So first of all, talk about what neuroplasticity is and share this analogy.
Yeah. So there's 3 things you need to think about with neuroplasticity being one of them. One is neurogenesis and neuropruning. This is happening all the time. When you were born, you actually had a brain that was at 18.1 volts. You were fully operational. You learned a new language. You learned how to walk. You learned how to talk. You learned how to use this whole biological system. And you did it without thinking about it. You didn't get textbooks. You didn't have to go to class. You learned it by absorbing it because we learn through experiences, right? So what happens as we age, as we start doing the same things over and over again, the brain goes, we don't need that neuroprune. So think of your neural network in your brain like a field, and it's summertime and you're going to the store and the grass is low then. you're 18.1 volts. You're just cruising across it. No problem. You can go anywhere you want because you've got all these different neural pathways. But eventually those weeds grow up. So now you're in a wheat field that's up to your shoulders, but somebody tells you, you can get to the store 5 minutes faster if you go this way, but I got to walk through all those weeds. But if you start doing it, it's going to be hard at first because it takes energy. Now, when you're about 21 years old, that brain is going to start to modulate at about 10.1 volts. If it drops below 7, you're going to have dementia-like symptoms. If it drops below 4, you're going to have Alzheimer's. We've proved this in our study in Florida. We did a Saving Your Brain study. It's written in a book called Saving Your Brain. And we showed that as soon as we got every person in that study above 7 volts of energy, they no longer demonstrated dementia symptoms. Now, we couldn't diagnose them. They had to go back to their doctor. But their doctors were blown away. What are you doing? Oh, it can't be that. It can't be so simple. No, it is. Because man is complex, spirit is simple. The body knows what to do. So as we're doing these things, so what neuroplasticity is how do we bring energy to the cells? So I'll give the listeners a few ways to do that. How do you get the energy? One is when you get up and exercise, any kind of movement is life. Movement creates that brain-derived neurotropic factors, BD and F. That is now, most people know about yoga now, Tai Chi and those things. They don't realize why they were created. They think they're exercises. They're not. They were all designed to get the person to be able to meditate. Because when you close your eyes or you go to sleep, you're doing 50% more neuroactivity than you are when you're awake. Your brain is on fire when you're asleep. You need energy to sleep. Most people don't have the energy to sleep. They think, they don't need a Snickers bar or a Coke. What they need is ATP. So how can we get ATP in the body? First thing you can do is change your thoughts. Because they've proven overall, there was a study done during COVID that actually showed mitochondria, which we can measure with the NeuroCheck too, but we can measure that energy output of the body. If somebody lives their life in fear, like they did this with COVID, if you looked at COVID as a threat rather than a challenge, you produce 200 times less light energy. Now, your mitochondria, your metabolism that keeps you healthy is actually your body absorbing light energy, codes from the sun and from your environment, from everything, because and that is then projecting those codes back down into the body. So imagine you turn it off 200% of that. You're going to lower, and then what they found out, and this is what blows my mind, in 2018, they found a part of the body that they didn't know existed before. Because in 2003, they said, hey, I mapped the human genome. I know all about you. I know your eye color, your hair color, your skin color, but I don't know 99% of it. So let's call that junk, right? Well, God didn't make any junk. But what they found out in 2018, because we now have the technology, is those cells, those DNA pairs change at an average of every 40 seconds. So every part of you changes every 40 seconds. You are adapting. When you talk about thinking immune system, thinking this neuroimmunology, neurophysiology, you are a thinking machine, but you're doing it all unconsciously because on a conscious level, you can only do so many things. So we rely on our subconscious. So and this is the good and a bad thing for the brain. When you think about neuroplasticity, if you live near a junkyard or you live near an airport or train station, those sounds, those smells, those experiences, you kind of learn to forget them. You might go over to a friend's house. How can you stand it? Those airplanes are going over all the time. I don't even hear them anymore because the brain is really good at basically filtering out things. So somebody could be in a mold home and they start getting a runny nose and they get flu-like symptoms and they go to the doctor and the doctor says, take this pill. They take the pill and for a while they feel good and the brain goes, I guess it's not a problem. So you just sit in there and cook like the frog in the boiling pot in Psychology 101, where they have the frog just doing the back pedal and he dies before he knows the water's too hot. But if you took that pot to a boil, it would never jump in there. Yeah. So you take somebody from the outside, goes into that home, goes, you got mold in here. What? I didn't know that.
Nose blind.
Yeah, nose blind. That's every sense is like that.
Yeah.
Because we're a sensory-based system, right? We're looking around the world. And every time in the olfactory sense is the first one that's created in the brain. So that's the strongest one. So if you start turning that one off, you start turning them all off. Just kind of wrapping up neuroplasticity. So one way we can do it is exercise. The other is breath. There's 3 different breaths during the day that I recommend people do for exercise. If you don't own the BrainTap equipment, you should wake up in the morning and do some kind of psychological breathing. You can do breath of fire if you want, or you can do the psychological breath. We do this naturally. Like you might be fed up with something, go, and somebody around you goes, what was the big sigh about? Well, they call it a psychological sigh because our body naturally does it. All Pets do it. Dogs, when they get nervous, they'll start shaking. Well, they're trying to get rid of all that nervous energy. Kids with autism do it because they're stimming. They have too much beta activity going on and too much energy in the system. Your body works like a capacitor. It's always absorbing and transmitting energy. So if it doesn't have a root for that energy, then that's why breathing's important. When you talk about mental health, all negative emotional states have one thing in common: lack of breath. You can't be depressed and breathe. You can't be angry and breathe. You can't be distressed and breathe. When you start breathing, you start thinking about solutions. You start moving. But as soon as you hold your breath, and so many people don't know how to breathe. So in the morning, you get up, do that psychological breath. It's just and you might want to do it away from people because they might think you're crazy, but do it in your bedroom before you leave the bedroom. And that'll reset your sympathetic system, because some people wake up in the morning already stressed. They used an alarm clock, which is one of the other bad things you can do in the morning. If you have to wake up to some sound, it should be some beautiful sound that welcomes you to the day, not something that blares off the hook, because immediately what happens is you have something called the liver that most people don't think is connected to the brain, but it has 300 functions that it connects to the brain with. And that liver houses 25 grams of sugar. And as soon as you get that alarm goes off, and the average person hits the alarm 3 times. So they get this 3 times, 3 hits of 5 tablespoons of sugar. They get out of bed and they've already eaten breakfast. But it's not the good sugar, because they think there's a bear after them or a tiger or something like that, because the body doesn't discern what the stress is about. And now they're chasing that the whole day. Then they go out and have coffee, and then they go have a bagel and a banana and coffee and think, wow, I'm great. I'm eating healthy today. They don't realize that sugar is the number 1 killer of the brain, at least in today's market. And then at 2:00 in the afternoon, we need to do a breath that I call, that they use, the Navy SEALs use, the 4 breath, the box breath. And it's very simple to do. You just breathe into the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, breathe out to the count of 4, leave it out for the count of 4. And you can do this at stoplights. You can do this when you're waiting at the doctor's office. Anytime you have 3 or 4 minutes, start teaching your nervous system. This is brain fitness, because your brain's not just up here. Remember, it's everywhere. I just say the 3 brains, but really every cell is not only a pharmacy. When you have muscle, you have the pharmacies that make you feel good, because we all know people that were negative and then they went and started exercising. Now they become this positive person. That's because they're now generating the hormones and the neurochemicals they need to feel good. If you want to see the Statue of Liberty, you can't look out here in Santa Monica. You got to go to New York. So we got to take them to the right state of mind to get there and get their body producing those things. And then in the evening, which is the most important thing for sleep, is to unwind the body. Most people think you're supposed to close your eyes, go to sleep. And there is sleep routines, and I know those are really important, and I believe in all of those things. But what's really super important is that you do something like the 4-8 breath before you go to bed. And what I mean by that is you breathe into the count of 4, you study any tension in the body, because remember, your body's holding onto that tension. If it doesn't ever release it, that's why people will gnaw their teeth and they'll wake up with their hand in a fist, or they get cramps while they're sleeping, because their body is trying to get rid of that energy. But you can do this for it. So you breathe into the mental count of 4, breathe out to the count of 8. And as you breathe out, you do a body scan. Just check out your body. And when you get really good at it, you breathe in whatever problems are happening to the day. You don't want to solve them. You just want to give it to the subconscious. It knows how to solve them. And then you breathe out to the count of 8, and you think about all the things you're grateful for. Because when you start thinking about things you're grateful for, the brain, there's something called the reticular activating system in the brain. And this is, in the best example I can give is, you just bought a new car. You thought, hey, and I still remember my wife when she bought a van, she said, I got this van, nobody has it. I started laughing. She goes, what are you laughing about? I said, count how many vans you see on the way home. She counted 11 vans from the dealership to the house. And she thought she had the only van like that, because those vans were not in her reticular activator. So she didn't notice them before. Now, when you buy it, it's there. So we want to keep in our reticular activating system grateful things we're positive about, building up that positive momentum in the day. And every time you think of one of those, you've just downloaded $15,000 to $18,000 worth of neurochemicals that you can't buy at the pharmacy. And they're encoded for you, like you said, they're encoded for your body, for you at this time. And you start setting up the sequence that says, hey, this is a great place to be. I'm in a great place. You're around high energy people. You're eating high energy food. You're doing high energy activities. Your body says, this is where I like to fly. I don't like to fly down here with all the muck. You can be down there if you want, but the results are up here. But you've got to make the switch. And it takes action. That's why like in the Bible, they say faith without works is dead. You got to do the work. You can't just think about it. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, you just meditate about it. Well, if you never leave the bedroom, you're never going to make a dime. If you want to make the money, you got to get out there and do the hard stuff, because then that's the walking through this field. That's the hard stuff.
Yeah.
But pretty soon that becomes the easy stuff because the old path grows back up. The new path is now easy.
Yeah.
But you've got to do it enough times to make it easy.
Yeah. This is so powerful. So to just take one step back really quickly, and I'm thinking about the movie Signs with Mel Gibson.
Yes.
Shout out. This is a pretty good movie. But, if we understand what we're doing right now, our thoughts, so much of our health and our results in our lives are a result of our thoughts, right? And those paths that are already kind of carved out in the wheat field, it's easy. It's automated at this point. And so when we want to do something different, that's when we're starting to go where the wheat is higher, and it's a little bit more difficult to get through. Not sometimes a lot more difficult, but as you do it repeatedly, you're going to create a new path. And the old path, especially in kids, it kind of withers away. And I wanted to ask you about that. This pruning, this neural pruning that you talked about, it can kind of dissolve and go away. For adults, it's different. It can happen for sure. But what it really is, based on, what I'm learning from you, is that those paths that we carve out, as we do it repeatedly and really create a clear path, it becomes stronger and easier. And the other path just becomes less attractive.
Yeah, it's an energy equation. You have the energy. I mean, if you have a good night's sleep, you wake up, you can make those changes. Yeah. But if you don't have a good night's sleep, you wake up, you fall back to default network. So you've got to be willing, where Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit. It's not just about boxing. It's about life. It's never going to be, today's not going to go like it's planned. You're going to have a plan, but you should plan on something not going right. And how are you going to adjust? It's how do you recover? That's the secret in today's world is how do you recover? And Tom Brady, who's one of our users, he said, every minute of exertion takes 2 minutes of recovery. So you can count sleep in that. So during the day when you're having all this stress, how much sleep do you need? And this is the sleep equation that blows people's minds. To win any Oura Ring, or Whoop watch, any of those things, you need 1 hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep. And you'll beat any score because it's not an hour of deep sleep all at one time. The body goes through these cycles. So that's why you want to unwind at night, because most people it takes 4 hours to get to that first sleep cycle. If we can cut that down to 20 minutes, now you got all the rest of this time to get all this other delta activity and why people have increased delta. That's going to detox the brain, right? I'm sure Michael Bruce talked about it on your podcast about the gliolymphatic system. That's another part of the body in 2015 they didn't know about. If you went back in time to every physiology book on the planet, the lymph system stops at the neck. But during a sleep study, someone noticed, hey, what's this system of the body that's operating? Like the X-Men. What else is inside of us right now that could be activated at the right moment, at the right time, with the right sequence of events, the right activities? We don't even know we could be superhuman. We don't know that because we're limiting ourselves based on our past beliefs. But there's a future out there for us that I think if people are willing to live up to the challenge, eat the right foods, be around the right people, take care of the right activities, those opportunities are going to show up.
Yeah. You mentioned the delta sleep. Yeah. This is a great opportunity to talk about the different stages or brain frequencies, because in the book, when I was in school, there were four that we talked about that we learned in college, a costly university. But now we know that there's more. So let's talk about these different brain states. There's 16,
but I'm going to talk about 6 that are really important. So right now we're talking at a beta alpha level, hopefully, in a perfect brain world, we'd have 45% beta, 30% alpha. That means that we have access to our reactionary mind because if somebody throws a ball at me, I want to be able to catch it or swerve away from traffic. But I want my alpha mind because that's the intuitive mind. You're always predicting the future. When Deepak Chopra said 97% of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, you know about today, what are you pretending not to know? A lot of people pretend they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They go buy a 6-pack and they're going to stop drinking tomorrow. Well, that doesn't equal. Or they buy a pack of cigarettes, I'm going to stop smoking. Non-smokers don't buy cigarettes. People who don't drink alcohol don't buy 6-packs. You know what I mean? You got to start living your life as if those things are already happening. Then the neurology figures it out. So that beta brain is really important.
Is beta faster than alpha?
Yes. Beta is anywhere between 12 to 40 cycles per second. And this is the only place in the brain where fear, frustration, anxiety, all negative emotions reside. If those negative emotions drop into alpha, you have psychosis and you have, somebody's going to be trying to help you out because alpha is a place of timelessness, and that's your creativity. Now, between beta and alpha, there's what we found in neuroscience is the most important brainwave for cognitive thinking is called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. And this is where exercise comes in. But what we showed in the lab was we can actually get you better balance by doing BrainTap or using light, sound, and vibration, audio-visual entrainment than you can by exercising. Now, when you combine the two, you got a powerful force because now you're moving the physiology at the same time you're basically changing your psychology. When that happens, it flips a switch. Because you're moving the neurology and you're thinking about it, now you've got these powerful brain waves that are happening. And this is the one that when you drink too much coffee in the morning or too much caffeine, a little bit is okay. Like a lot of biohackers will take caffeine and all that. I don't think you need it, but if they want to have this little high level thinking, also nicotine in small doses is good. They're finding out all these things, but anything in high dose isn't good. So SMR, that really is really active in the morning. That's why exercise in the morning is so much better for the body. They say 20 minutes in the morning is 40 minutes at night because your brain is ready for it. Now, when you drop out of alpha, which is your intuitive mind, where all your creativity is, where your solutions are, where your speaking patterns are. That's why when people used to be the biggest fear in the world was public speaking. That's because when you're in stress, that brainwave collapses. You can't be creative if you're being chased by a bear or a tiger. You got to just be reactionary. You got to just get the heck out of there as fast as you can. That's why we either have to freeze, flee, or fight, whatever's going on. So what we want to do, but if we can just teach people to pause, break, and breathe, their life would change tremendously. It's the reactionary mind that's causing all the problems because this is something that usually blows people's minds, but the Navajo Indians said 7 generations are helping them because they didn't know about genealogy. But now neuroscientists are telling us that in our genes, 7 generations of your family are inside you right now. 7, they did a study with sandalwood and they took mice and they taught these mice every time they smelled sandalwood, they would jump. Then they waited 5 generations of mice and they introduced sandalwood to them. They jumped. Just as if they were trained in that. So how is that possible? Because we're encoded. We come out of the womb with a personality, we are formatted, but then we get reformatted, with brothers, sisters, teachers, preachers, and everybody else that's telling us what to do. So this brainwave of beta, there's no training that happens there. In fact, if you wanted to do training at the beta level, it takes about 16,000 times of doing something right. So going through that field, it would take 16,000 times. Now you drop into alpha, you just reduced it in half. But now the key is how do we get to theta? Because my dad was a Silva instructor, Silva method mind control. And we would go to alpha and we'd use this alpha sound. That's how I got into all this. And somebody says, why'd you get into this? Well, in the 70s, Jose Silva had something called the Silva sound. Now we know it as isochronic tones, but he didn't let out the secret. It was something he created. But in the room, you could play this music. It's like an isochronic tone generator, like a mountain that resonates at 7.8 hertz frequency. You just get up there and you start producing theta waves, which is the next brainwave we're talking about. When you drop into these brainwaves, your body, there's 64 neurotransmitters, so we're not going to go through all of them. But in alpha, you start to create acetylcholine, start to feel good. In beta, you create dopamine, which is an adjutant. You never get satisfied. I don't care who you are. That's why you have to say no to that part of your brain because it doesn't matter. You get it. You want more. It doesn't satisfy you. It just agitates you. And that's what dopamine does. It's supposed to get you out of bed, get you moving in the morning because you're part of the food chain. Get up, move. If you're not moving, somebody's going to get you. But then when we drop into alpha, we start to be more relaxed, more comfortable. We start to see the world more in a 360-degree view. We start to be creative. We start to think outside the box. But when we get to theta, that's where these great inventors like Tesla, Einstein, Edison, they would do these exercises where they'd sit in a chair like this and they'd have an iron ball in their hand. And as soon as the iron ball fell, all the tension out of their body, right? Then now they would get a spontaneous breakthrough. Because the body's energy was gone. All the tension was gone in the body. They all did something like that. One held a spoon over a plate, one held a ball. They all had different techniques, but they were little cat naps. And basically, as we go through the day, these things happen. But in theta, when you're producing GABA, the key thing about GABA for this day and age is GABA is a precursor to something called DMT. So if you've ever thought about a mountaintop experience, and somebody says, wow, that was a mountaintop experience, that was out of this world. Well, they probably tapped into GABA because then every cell of your body has that God molecule in it. It's going to activate. Now you're going to start thinking way outside the box because you're not this physical body. Everybody at a funeral believes there's something after that. Now, a week later, they won't. But at the funeral, they go, oh, he's in a better place or she's in a better place. They know. But they've done studies where they actually have measured bodies. When they die, they lose 3/4 of an ounce. What is this 3/4 of an ounce? That's you. That's the energy that animates this body. So when we think about the brain and the body, this is an interface. It's not us. It's an interface to this reality. If we don't take care of this interface, then if we have a bad TV and we can't pick up, when I was growing up to watch the Tigers games in Detroit, one of the brothers had to hold on to the antenna, act like the antenna, because we're transmitting and receiving information all the time. We are conductive. When I'm with you, there's conductive information coming back and forth. It's beyond what we're talking about. And that happens in every group. That's why we have gainers and drainers. The gainers are the people, when we leave them, that we feel energized. Wow, this is great. And the drainers are like, man, that person wears me out. They got on my last good nerve. I hope they don't come back. Because they drain. There are energy vampires because our mitochondria is craving that energy. So when you think about it, now all that's happening when you're awake, these brainwaves I'm talking about. Now, when you drop into delta is when your body gets to repair. You're out of the way. You can't be there. So think about, you're at the Ford Motor Plant and you have to clean the line. They're not going to keep building the machines. You got to get off the line so they can clean the line. That's what's happening in the nervous system. So think of the glial lymphatic system, the glia system of this body's like we're at a networking party and we're all little glia cells and we're shaking hands and we're doing everything. At the end of that party, we're going to want to clean our hands. Whether you're paranoid about that or not, you just touch everybody's hands. You're going to want to clean your hands. So every night when we go to sleep, the spinal fluid actually comes up through the spinal cord into the brain and flushes out the body, but it only does this during level 4 sleep. This is something they only discovered in 2015 too. I mean, could you imagine that? They didn't know that existed. And people go, it used to be when I was growing up, sleep's for the dead, and you'd brag how much you didn't sleep. Because you could, but when you're younger, you can get away with it. When you're older, you pay for it. So delta sleep is so important. Sleep is the number one superpower generator. And whatever you're going through right now in your life, whether a health crisis or business crisis, whatever, that's your proving ground for your superpower. If you can meet the challenge, you will have a superpower that other people will pay you for because you've made it through it. And you should always be thinking about that because we're not here alone. Nobody gets out of here alive. So, let's figure out how we can work together and make it happen. And then we go to the higher states now. Just 5 years ago, actually, if you'd have told me about gamma, I'd have said, nothing happens there. Gamma's nothing. But I got a call from Dr. Rosenthal in Dallas, Texas. He said, I want to do a PTSD study on the brain, and I want to use a psilocybin. And I'd never done a psilocybin at that point. I have since a few times, and you got to invest a lot of time. It's like playing golf. You got to have 8 hours, so I don't have 8 hours a lot of the time, but I did it because I wanted to experience what it was like for the vets. But we had some vets that didn't want to do it because they were afraid that they might cause them to become addicted to a psilocybin, which they take people off addiction. But we said, okay. So I said, David, let's measure their brains on EEG. Let's map their brains while they're doing a psilocybin, the ones that were doing it. We didn't do the first session because sometimes it can get a little wild for people, but the second session, they understand what's going to happen and they do all right. And what we found was there's a region of the brain just to the right up here, in that region of the brain lights up big time and creates high level gamma brainwaves. So I said, let me create a series with BrainTap, my brainwave entrainment device that does brain fitness, and let's see what happens with that. Well, what happened was David called me up. He says, he said, I've never done a psilocybin, but I had the trips just like you're talking about. I got to talk to my parents and do all these things. I said, yeah, because it's not the psilocybin that's doing it. It's your brain doing it. Whatever pill you put in, it's not the pill doing it. It's your brain interaction with it. That's why they call it practicing medicine. Let's see if this works. That doesn't work. Let's put this one in there. It's your body's reaction to it. If your body can react to it, you can intuit it. You can get your brain to do it. So how do we trigger gamma? You can do that by doing high-level activities like exercise. We'll do that. High-level, when we do athletes, professional athletes like pro boxers and things like that, when they're in the zone, when you're kind of in a timeless place, it's like a higher level of theta. It goes from 40 to whatever. They've registered monks' brainwaves at 300 cycles per second. Now, I only trained to 88 because I like that number. But but from 40 to 88, and what we find is, think of that gamma is the bass drum for the brain, and it keeps everything in rhythm. It's like the in a band, the drum that just boom, 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 boom. And what we find as we age, that gamma rhythm goes away and dysregulates the brain. In our study, we showed that when I talk about voltage, we have two hemispheres. They should both be matched. If it's 10.1 here, it should be 10.1 here. If it's 9, it should be 9. What we find with dementia and Alzheimer's is this could be 9, this could be 6. And we usually find the left hemisphere slows down before the right hemisphere. So we had to create brain fitness exercises to get them going and get them doing some planks. And it's amazing what you can get people to do once you start, give them a little bit at first, get their body to do it, get them eating the right nutrition, their brain will follow suit. The brain knows what to do. The brain is designed to heal. But if you keep doing the same things you're doing and wishing and praying and taking some pharmaceutical, it's not going to happen. You can't have a pill to do this.
Yeah,
you
just
have
said
a skill.
it. The brain knows what to do.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about now, what are we doing? What's going on in our lives today that's disrupting our ability? Because our brain knows what to do to be able to shift from these different states to really present and create the best life for us. Yeah. I want to ask you about the 3 T's. Okay. If you could talk about that.
Okay. So we're talking about the 3 T's. There's thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So if you have a trauma, obviously you're going to go to a doctor, get it fixed, whatever needs to happen. But most people don't realize the only way your brain detoxifies is through deep sleep. So if you're not sleeping, you're never going to win. The toxins are going to build up. You're going to get leaky brain. You're going to have brain fog. You're going to get irritable, those kind of things. But your thoughts are the key. Because if your thoughts aren't right, and you're stressed out and angry, you could take the world's greatest nutrition. Guess where it's going? Because when you're stressed out, all the blood and everything goes out to the extremities when you need to be digesting. Digestion's put on hold. You don't have to digest that meal. You got to live your life. So the body's saying, hey, you got to protect yourself. So we got to calm down. That's why even Virginia Hunt, who used to be over here at UCLA, she passed away now, but she showed that by saying a prayer before you eat, your digestion works better. There's a physiological benefit to that. She actually showed that your energy actually increases when you slow down brainwave activity on something called Kirlian photography. We can measure the emissions. In fact, if you go to the NIH website today and type in biosphere, NIH in 1994 said all illness starts in the field, in the biofield. But why are they giving us pills? They're dropping a 55-gallon drum into a pond and saying, fix the pond, when it's the environment of the pond. We need to fix the environment of the pond. We don't need the drum because they're trying to, what they're doing is they're masking the symptoms. I still remember a client coming in and saying, and this is part of the whole thing, she thought, we asked her a question in the interview, from 0 to 1, are you healthy? She said 10%. She was a 10. She was healthy. But I looked and she was taking over 11 prescriptions. And I said, you're healthy, a 10, but you're taking, oh, that's why I'm a 10. I said, no, that's not why you're a 10. You're here because those aren't working. You put a black tape over your idiot lights on your car. It said the engine needs fixing. You said, I don't want to see that. I want to put a black light over it. Medicine does not fix you. That's why I really want to get Robert Kennedy to change our healthcare. There is no healthcare. There's sick care. Healthcare is all the other people that are, because you go to a doctor. I've had so many people tell me, they said, come back when you're sick enough that we can work with you. You're not quite there yet. When you're this bad, we can start treating you.
You're pre-diabetic.
Yes.
You're not diabetic yet.
Yeah. You have that problem, right? But they don't know what to do because they're never taught about it. That's why I have all these like functional neurologists now and nutrition experts that are talking about health, because health is different than sickness. I'm glad we're here in America where we have the greatest sick care in the world, but it's not going to help me be healthy. No pharmaceutical is going to make me healthy. There's no pill that can give me the skill of health. There's a lifestyle that can do that.
I want to dig a little bit deeper on one of those T's, which again, you go into all this stuff in the book. Brain Fitness Blueprint. Yes. All right, Brain Fitness Blueprint. And I love this because it's giving, when we hear about fitness, this for us psychologically, I think it's something that's more malleable and changeable versus like you have a state of health, like you have your state of mental health, which can be a little bit harder to move. Fitness is more approachable, right? So I love that approach. I want to ask you a little bit more about traumas. Mm-hmm. In the book, you call them unseen scars. Yes. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
So think about when I was in school and I went to electronics school, we could take a potato and we would put a speaker on it and then we'd find the crystal, like it was or 14. So we could go down to Radio Shack, which was a store you could buy all these things. And you put that crystal in the potato, you'd have a radio. Because without that crystal in the potato, you got nothing. Those thoughts are like that crystal. Now it's broadcasting through the body. You don't see the scars. That's why they say sticks and stones can break bones, but words last forever. Because the psychological scars are more energy scars. They crystallize in the energy system of the body. And so they run the patterns. Like when my kids were growing up, they used to say, "Dad, you're making me angry." And I'd take out the remote and I'd say, "Thanks, I got your remote. I'm going to put you to sleep." Because I was teaching them that nobody can make you angry or happy. But everybody's thinking the outside world's going to make you angry or happy. But what they're doing is these are triggers. They're just laying there dormant, not doing anything. It's like the old AOL CDs. They'd send you for free and they say, "Hey, if you want to activate it, pay $79.95. They didn't have to download anything then. It would just unlock the CD. The same thing's true with our brain. We have all these hidden codes, like a game that somebody says some word or they look at you some way and they go, "Don't give me that look." Whatever. We have all these triggers. If we know they're triggers, we can control them. They don't have to control us. We can desensitize those triggers. But if we just let them lay dormant, like that thing that you fear, like Job says, "What if fear has come upon me?" Because if you dwell in that fear, it's going to manifest. The emotion of that experience is going to manifest. Not what you want. You get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So you have to rehearse it. That's where visualization, relaxation, guided imagery, changing your thought patterns, being more present. Those are all really important things for the brain, because if not, you go into default. When you asked earlier, what's the perfect day laid out for brain fitness, that's why you have to get up in the morning. You got to get ready, just like a game. Today's a game. What are we going to do? Could you imagine going to a movie and they never rehearsed? This is just an ad lib movie, pay $15 to go see it. No, you're not going to do that. They rehearsed. They took them 2 years maybe to make that movie.
There's a couple movies that are like that.
Yes, yeah. But people live their life like that. They don't ever plan their future. They don't ever plan what to do differently. They don't ever do, but they want to bitch about it. They want to complain about it. Now their brain thinks that's what they want to do. That's what they bring about because they're thinking about it. So that's why you have to, one of the techniques I teach is called the stop sign technique. Because you're talking about these scars. When they come up, you say, "Stop," visualize a red stop sign. And you say to yourself, "Stop giving it energy, stop giving it time in my mind." And then you think of 3 different ways it would happen. Because if you only have one way, you have a phobia. You have 2 ways, you have a dilemma. If you have 3 ways, you have choices. And I always tell people that 3rd way can be as crazy as you want. Because if you can think of a crazy way to respond to that situation that doesn't hurt anybody, but it's just crazy, your brain had to create all the ones between that, because the brain is analog, not digital. It's analog, not digital. It doesn't just jump from here to here. It's got to think of all the different scenarios. But you have a 100 billion neural processor. It can do it in a heartbeat. It can solve your problems in a heartbeat. While we've been sitting here, not only has every DNA pair changed every 40 seconds, you've changed 50 million cells per second. And your body kept track of that. You didn't have to do it. You were breathing over 21,000 times a day. You didn't have to think about that. You blink 20,000 times a day. You don't think about that. You're digesting your breakfast. You didn't have to think about that. All those things are being controlled by a power far greater than you, but it's inside you right now, ready for you to tap into and use. But you have to be in the right emotional, physiological state to do that. And food is not only medicine, as Hippocrates said, but it's also a drug. It moves, I love it when parents say, "Sugar can't be that bad." I said, go to a birthday party. Kids are acting really good. They're all playing, and then break out the cake. Now you're going to have people fighting, screaming, pulling hair. The kids are going to go crazy because you just gave them a neurotoxin. Their brain went offline. It's just the same as having a drink. But in this case, it's stimulating them. So they have to act out. And then they go, "That's a bad child. We need to put them on Ritalin." No, need to get them off the sugar and dies, like my mother did to us when we were kids. That's how I got into this. And she went to an iridologist and she said, "Your kids aren't spazzes. They're being fed the wrong foods." My dad worked for the cereal companies. We were eating the box cereals. And one of the studies I love is that I always taught to my clients was there was a study done where they took the cereal, like cornflakes, and they took the box the cornflakes were made in, and they fed it to rats. Guess which rats lived longer? The box. The ones that ate the box lived longer than the ones that ate the cornflakes. That's how much value there is in those cereals. So it's crazy.
In kind of pivoting from this conversation about trauma, which we all experience traumas, this could be big T or little t, micro traumas or big things that happen in our lives. And you shared a sentiment when I was watching one of your talks, and you shared that there's a value in those hardships oftentimes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. If we look at our hardships as our liabilities, then we got to carry them around like an anchor. They weigh us down. I call them dragons of the past because we drag them on, drag them on, drag them on. It's just a play on words. So we don't want those dragons. We want to slay those dragons. So what I did is I reframed it. I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic because my dad didn't have a chance. Both his parents were alcoholics. One was a drug addict because she was a nurse and it was pharmaceutical drugs, but she could dispense her own medication. And she got sent home from the hospital at 56 to die, and she lived to be 93 because she got off all her pharmaceuticals. And so my grandfather's an alcoholic. Now, obviously, I could be a really good alcoholic. I have the genetic propensity for it, but I choose not to drink. So am I an alcoholic? Somebody goes, well, you're not drinking because you're an alcoholic and you're afraid. I go, if that fear helps me, then it's good. But anything that's happening to you, and I said it earlier in the show, this is your dark night of the soul. No Marvel comic superhero didn't go through the dark night of the soul. No saint didn't have to be a sinner first. There's always a dark night. But if you stay stuck in the dark night, you'll just keep cycling through it. You've got to rise above that again. You can either be in the muck. In my one book, Awaken the Genius, where that statement is too, I have a story about Caleb, and he's walking in the mud and he's praying to God, get me out of this mud, get me out of this. He says, I keep calling to you. I'm over here where the shore is, but you keep walking in the muck. There's signs every day. You can't be, if people get help with AA, great. If whatever helps you to do it, but you need to figure out that you are not a behavior. That's the number one law of psychology. But we are given labels at birth. He's a smart one. He's a dumb one. I was a dumb one. I was held back in second grade. But my dad taught me differently. And that's why I was blessed. He got the help. You could be that help to your family. You could be the one that breaks the chain. When you think of third generation welfare families, in Chicago, what they found was they were doing the study with third generation welfare families, and the kids were literally being conditioned to be a welfare recipient because, hell, I'm smart. Grandpa's smart. Great grandpa was really smart. Look they're on welfare. Well, being smart doesn't make you successful. I know a lot of successful people that aren't successful. That still have all the same problems. It's about taking action. What are the little micro things you can change today to make a difference? In my case, because my dad was an alcoholic and he knew we needed help, the worst thing parents do is send their kids to the room and say, think about what you did. That's our prison system in a nutshell. The biggest business in the world today is prisons. There's a problem with that. Why do we need to keep building prisons? It's because they're not training them right. My dad would send us to the room with a book, and the first book he sent me to was As a Man Thinketh. I'd have to read that book and come out. At first, I was just BSing him, Dad, I'm going to do this. Because I had to tell him how I was going to take that knowledge and apply it, because knowledge is not power. Knowledge applied is power. So anything you've heard from this podcast, if you don't apply it, it's just information. It's nothing. But if you start applying it, in one of the things my dad taught me too was when he'd have somebody coming into the clinic, he was a psychologist as well, and they'd say, this isn't working. Let's say it's weight loss. I'll just use that example. He would say to them, if I ask you to gain weight, could you do it? And they'd say, yeah. How would you do it? And they'd start saying what they would do. He says, oh, wait a minute. You mean you do something? So you can either do something to stay stuck or you can do something to be free. You've got to be willing to do the hard things. I always say you have to do the things you have to do until you can do the things you want to do. Everybody just wants it because we live in a quick fix, Facebook, click happy. Everybody's having their greatest life ever. We don't want to go through that pain, but that pain's there for a reason, and you made it. Whether you believe it or not, it's your making. I had a chance of talking to the group that was in the Hanoi Hilton, they called it, where these were prisoners of war. And they're written about all the time, but I had him on an interview, the one guy, and he said they played golf every day. They left there and none of them had a problem. They spent every day playing golf on different courses, and they would explain, they'd pick out the clubs, they would hit the ball, they would keep score. Their mind was occupied with something positive. They weren't thinking about the torture and the lack of food and lack of water and all of that. They were focused on what they could do when they get out of there. What are you going to do when you get out of there? What is your life going to look like? And this is where affirmations kind of fall down. Even though I love affirmations, Hay House published my book. So, but they need to be upgraded. Because let's say that you say to yourself, you go in the mirror and say, I'm healthy, but then you have a health crisis. and you're feeling that health crisis, you're going to amplify that health crisis by saying that. Because it's not these words that resonate out into the universe and bring back your reality. It's your emotions. Energy drives behavior. But what if you said, what would life be like if I was healthy? What would I do? What would I be seeing? How would I be seeing it? Who would I talk to? You start using the what, where, when, whom, and how often questions at the beginning of your affirmations. You transform them into energy because our brain likes energy. It likes movement. So our thoughts have to be that way too. And then we're going to get stuck states. And when somebody says, I had to go to Alateens growing up because my dad was an alcoholic. But then eventually, what am I going to these meetings for? My dad's not an alcoholic anymore. I'm not an alcoholic anymore. Why don't you live a life of a non-alcoholic? Well, that's the way everybody should be living. If there's no alcohol, we wouldn't have this problem. It's not like you don't really have an inherent alcohol gene or non-alcohol gene. You have genes that either respond to sugar or they don't. Because it's not the alcohol, it's the sugar content that your brain can't handle. You get the same thing with candy bar. Your brain's going to disarray. There's never been a shooting where they didn't find candy bar wrappers all over the place. The guy was a junk food junkie. His brain was offline. He wasn't thinking right.
So obviously, this is transformative. And a lot goes into fitness. A lot goes into brain fitness specifically. And you outline all these pieces in the book. You talk about nutrition. We've already kind of dug in on some really important tactics with our sleep health. And I want to ask you about something that I feel might be one of the greatest leverage points. And I'm so grateful that you talked about this in the book. It's a big part of why I do what I do. You talked about the essential link between human connection and brain health. Yes. Talk about why that matters with our brain fitness.
Well, and all the Blue Zones studies, they've shown this too. But if you isolate, all addiction is isolation. When people start doing negative things, they don't have a connection, they don't have a community. We are community people. We need to interact. And it's not just on Facebook. I mean, you can have 5,000 friends, but do you have a friend you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a flat tire out here on the 405. Can you come help me out? If you don't have a friend like that, you don't have friends. And that connection we feel something, when we're around people, we get energized with the right tribe, right? And thinking about brain fitness, just so the users know, back in the 70s, they didn't think physical fitness was going to be anything. In fact, at our high school, they said they had a petition to stop us from putting in a weight room because they thought it was going to stunt our growth. Now, we know that's ridiculous now, but that's how people think. So brain fitness is the same way. We now realize we're living longer, we're exposed to more toxins. And so one of the things that I really believe every person I know should be taking is niacin, B3. It's very inexpensive. Niacin that's how Bill, the founder of AA, stopped drinking, not by going to AA meetings, by taking niacin. It was a nutritional problem. And why is that important? Because when you get a blood test, they're only checking 23% of your blood. The other's in your capillaries. You need that niacin to flush it out. So don't start with a lot, just start with a little bit. You get that flush and then find the amount that's right for you. But every morning, that's the next thing. When you do that, you'll have a clearer mind. You're detoxing your body and you're getting the capillaries because where there's blood flow, there's nutrition and there's oxygen. You could be eating the greatest nutrition, but if you're clogged because your arteries, the biggest study I can quote is the one they did on peanut oil. They thought it was a new health food and they went to the market with it because all these monkeys, in their 23% of their blood they're circulating, it didn't have any peanut oil. It says, this is a miracle oil. All those monkeys died within 3 months because that fat was deposited into their capillaries. And right now, seed oils are probably the second thing behind sugar as far as damaging to the brain. So we can clear those out with niacin. We're blowing it out with sending energy through those systems. So think about it like a big fire hose going through the system. And now you have clearer thoughts, you have more focus, and your body needs it anyway. B vitamins are important for the brain and in the body.
Yeah. You've got some incredible tips like this and so much more in this book. I'm so grateful that you put this together. Can you let everybody know where they can pick up a copy, pre-order? By the way, you got some bonuses right now for people that are listening right now to take advantage of. Let people know where they can get that.
Yeah, any bookstore you can get it at online or whatever. But if you do, then go back to brainfitnessblueprint.com. If you pre-order it, we have a really great list, over $900 worth of value that we're giving you. If you buy that book, tell us you bought it. We're going to send you a course, a brain fitness course that I developed that's 6 classes where I'm going to teach you, go into detail in all these things. You get that for free just by ordering the book.
That's amazing.
At any retailer.
That's amazing. So this is a video course?
Yes. It's video and audio.
Awesome. So again, go to brainfitnessblueprint.com right now. Take advantage of this incredible gift as well. So pre-order the book, take advantage of this gift. And one other thing before I let you go, in talking about the importance of community and relationships for our well-being, and also just, again, defending and kind of warding off some of the common culprits in our society, right? So whether this is depression, whether this is addiction, and you talk about in the book the connection with oxytocin. Oxytocin is getting a moment right now, but it's one of the most powerful things to help us to metabolize stress. So in closing, can you talk a little bit about oxytocin and how it relates to our relationships?
Well, it starts connecting those pleasure syndrome, the pleasure centers, in basically the amygdala that gets hijacked during stress and you become more animal nature. It subsides that. So think about it like you're putting the beast down, like with music. The brain, because they can't have both going at the same time. You can't have the high stress hormones and neurotransmitters and the relaxing ones and oxytocin and all of these ones. They all get, when you're around, we've all done it. We've been in the mall and we see a friend coming at a distance and we start getting happier and happier. And by the time we're there, we're smiling and then we hug them, and say, oh, it's been so long since you've seen him, because all the memories start queuing up. And we start getting all those flashbacks of positive things. That's why during that sleep cycle I was talking about, when you're breathing out, you want to remember those. My grandma had a great memory till she died at 93. She would remember her favorite vacations. I remember walking in her and she's talking. I said, "Are you on the phone?" She goes, "No, I'm just reviewing all my favorite vacations." And she had a great memory because she would use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So there's just little practical things you can do every day.
Amazing. I appreciate you so much. And also, you are the inventor of BrainTap.
Yes.
And even my guy here in the studio, one of our team members, mentioned that his roommate utilizes BrainTap. He heard your voice. He was like, "That sounds familiar." You get into Ubers, and people know, like, "Oh, are you Dr. Porter?" You guys are impacting so many different, especially like some of the data coming out of professional sports, the athletes that you're working with BrainTap. Talk just a little bit about BrainTap.
Yeah, we have a lot of almost every boxing champion. You'll see they have BrainTap on their shorts or their shirt because they're BrainTap users. We have Alex Guerrero, who's with TBRX, Tom Brady doing it. He's one of our, of course, biggest proponents. A lot of people in the NFL you would know are using it. A lot of the coaches are using it because I went and met with the Detroit Lions and things like that. So and a lot of our doctors, we have 3,000 clinics out there doing it. So a lot of our doctors are already in with the professional sports like hockey and things like that. And the Swiss Performance Institute is the biggest group we're working with, 40,000 Olympic athletes under contract. So they're working to get them. They don't all own the headset. They have the app, but the headset is something you can add to it. So you have an app that you can just use the app. And when they go to that site, Brain Fitness Blueprint, there's a link there where they can get the app for free for 14 days too.
Amazing, amazing. Can you give a brief summation of what BrainTap is?
Yeah, we use light, sound, and vibration to mimic nature and get the mirror neurons in the body to respond. So like when you walk near an ocean, it's 10 hertz frequency, that's alpha. We can mimic that with light, sound, and vibration. We can mimic sunrises and sunsets, which reset the gut biome. We can balance and train any brainwave, and we have a lot of science around that. I mean, we have 30 published studies, and right now, as we're sitting here, there's 6 published studies. There's 6 studies going on around the world right now, from India to Brazil to Italy to United States. We have studies going on just to show that the brain can change at any age.
Yeah.
You're not fixed. If you're having a problem right now, it's a blessing. Get it wherever you're at. This is the time to start changing your brain right now.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
When I was in my 20s, I got run over by a truck in a triathlon and broke 6 vertebrae in my back and was told I'd never walk again. And so that was a defining moment for me because I was weighing what I knew against what I didn't know. And the recommendation was a radical surgery where they put in stainless steel rods. And in my case, it would be from the base of my neck to the base of my spine.